How do you improve a team that, as you said, was third? How do you make a jump? How do you improve a bench? Where do you get veterans? Where do you get size? Where do you get strength? Where do you angle things out? How do you attempt to improve upon your rebounding, whatever it may be? One of the more interesting, for lack of a better word, because I'm not totally sure interesting fits in this context, but one of the reports that is out there, in addition to everyone's perceived, or at least the Pacers' perceived interest in Gordon Hayward, is Celtics are said to be, and we've heard this before, keeping an eye on what is going on with the Cavaliers' contract talks with Andre Drummond. Now, my first instinct when it comes to Andre Drummond is you run the other way. I want no part of Andre Drummond in Boston, not because I don't like the guy. He didn't kick my dog. It's just not a good defender, can't shoot, can't stretch the floor, doesn't seem to fit Brad Stevens' system, makes a whole lot of money. Yes, he improves your rebounding. Yes, he can give you some points on the inside. I just don't really like the fit. But, and I'll save this for after what you have to say, some I don't know, attempts at compelling viewpoints looking the other way as to how he does work in is, could be entertained. How do you feel, as I ramble on, how do you feel about Andre Drummond in the Celtics uniform if getting him probably means giving up Gordon Hayward, by the way, just in an effort to even make the money work?
Well, I don't want to say he's not a good shooter, but if you try to kick your dog, he might miss. Listen, Andre Drummond is a great rebounder. The Celtics haven't had that, although the Celtics have been a very good rebounding team over the last few years. Nobody really pays much attention to that because there's a lot of focus on the center position. And I get it because of what Bam Adebayo did. He was the MVP of the series. I don't think there's any question about that at 6'9". And it masked it was an unfortunate ending. We talk about how the season had an unfortunate ending. It was a very unfortunate ending for Daniel Tice, considering the year that he had, which was pretty phenomenal. And speaking of guys that are going to get paid at some point. And again, it's one of those things like, are you upgrading? Is Andre Drummond an upgrade from Daniel Tice? Well, that really depends on how close you watch the NBA now, because this isn't the NBA of 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Is Andre Drummond going to give you the defense that Daniel Tice gave you this year, and not just against other bigs, right? That's the old school basketball mentality. But now Daniel Tice is guarding point guards in pick and rolls and things like that. Think about what the NBA game is now. That's how you have to situate your roster. And unfortunately, there are players, and Drummond is sort of one of them, who, like Jahlil Okafor. Man, that dude just came into the league at the wrong time. He came into the league at the wrong time. This sort of happened to, Rondo has had this fascinating career arc where the game changed around him, and suddenly a guy that couldn't shoot it was tough to get on the floor. And he found a way. That's what makes, Rondo special, is that he found a way to sort of stay in the league and work around that. But the game sometimes can change, around you. Devin Harris was going to be one of the top point guards in the league when he first came in. He had this great year. I think he made the All-Star team one year with the net. And then the league just sort of changed around him and different guys came in at that position. Andre Drummond now is really more of he's a change of pace role, like Serge Ibaka with Toronto, sort of a change of pace role player, except he can't, obviously he's not going to shoot. You have to be able to shoot now. It's just invaluable with the way the game has played. And that three-point line, by the way, people say, what's coming next? There's going to be an adjustment where, all right, everything's a three-point line now, so eventually it's going to come back. No. You know what's going to happen? Trae Young, Damian Lillard, that's where the game is going. It's like, forget that, 5 feet behind the three-point line is where the NBA game, that's the next trend. The floor, the only way to extend the floor now is that way, offensively, to make bigs come even farther out, to where you can get guys now in high school and college are going to be able to start shooting that shot because they see Trae Young and Damian Lillard do it. And they know that's going to be a part of their ticket to get to the NBA. The guys that can make the 30-foot shots are going to be making $10 million a year, whatever the equivalent of that is, in 5 or 10 years. So that's what would make me nervous about Andre Drummond. He could win you some games. In the course of an 82-game season, Andre Drummond's going to give you some games, but he's just as likely to be a player that you get into a playoff series. And you know what? Like Cantor, who had, Cantor had a very good year and was very effective in spots, but there were certain times he wasn't going to play in the playoffs because of the matchup you get. And I think Andre Drummond, are you going to pay $25, $30 million a year for a guy who might not see the floor in a specific playoff series because of the matchup?
So a buddy of mine who comes on the show from time to time just to poke in and give us some stats and things like that. This isn't a stats analysis, but was sending me a slew of texts this morning about this Andre Drummond thing. And I'm going to tell you just some of what he wrote to me. saying that it's not his favorite thing to do with the Hayward contract. Not terrible either. This obviously trading for Drummond. He's an incredibly flawed player. Still young, has all the skills you'd want from that position. Time Lord's not ready. Tice's a 20-minute per game guy. Drummond's best year was when Stan Van Gundy kind of let him play the way Miami used Bam last year. He's got some skills as a passer, a handed-off guy. Defense obviously is a problem, but maybe Brad can get something out of him. I like the idea of him on an expiring contract. And I think adding on to that as much as anything, especially if you were to deal Hayward for him, helps get you under the salary tax.